Okay, we are ready to get started. If you don't mind, I just want to do a sound check. Everyone can hear me? I'm on a new device. He goes, thank you. Okay, I haven't used this device yet with Zoom, so thank you. All right. Okay, I appreciate that. For those of you who are just joining us now for the first time, thank you. This is kind of like our second season, so to speak, of the Kohelet class. So we, until this point, we've gotten from chapter 1 all the way through chapter 5, and this week we are starting with chapter 6. So this is kind of like it's not a brand new thought, but it happens to have been a pretty perfect stopping point, because it was a great place to both, from where it is in the chapter, but also in how it's in the kind of the content. We're in a good place to start fresh. So it's really good to have everybody here. Glad to see you all, and looks like we've got a nice crowd tonight. So, not that our crowd is usually not nice. So before anything gets started, let me just go and drop the link here in the chat. Okay, this is how we start off every class here. Just 1 second. Just give me 1 second there. I'm sorry. Okay, so that in the chat, that's our link to our website. If you want to catch up on anything, or if you have any, if you want to review anything, that's all there in on the website. All of our previous classes should be there, should be uploaded at this point. So if you want to catch up on anything, that's there. Feel free to chat, to send a question or anything in the chat, or just speak up anytime during the class if you're interested. That's perfectly acceptable in the class. All right, and we are ready to get started. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump to the share screen. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I was on the wrong screen. There we go. Okay, so now let me jump to the share screen. Okay, and here we have the text. Now, for those of you who are new here, the way we do it is I actually just present you with the Hebrew, and we discuss the English outside. The reason I do this is because I find that the translations don't get to the root of what we're trying to say a lot of times. Now, what I'm trying to do is give you a different, not necessarily what you're going to find in a translation. We're trying to get to the hidden meaning of the words that kind of lie below the surface a lot of times. So in order to do that, I don't want to provide you with a translation on the screen. So feel free to follow along in the Hebrew. If you have your own copy in English, feel free to follow along there too. But we are trying to do something very particular over here, and that's what we're going to do. And so what I like to do is I will highlight the text over here, and that kind of focuses our attention, and then we'll discuss the verses out loud. So until now, the idea that we've had is that Kohelet, the book of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, is unfortunately gets a bad rap because it ends up being a bit of a downer of a book. It's King Solomon's descent into sadness, it kind of seems at first glance. And what we're trying to do is understand that there's actually something very empowering that King Solomon's trying to do with the book of Kohelet. He's trying to actually show us a path towards happiness, not a path away from happiness, like people often think, but it's a path towards happiness. But in order to do that, he does take some time and kind of travel through a number of different paths to get there. And so what we found is that he downplays a lot of what people think leads to happiness. And again, it's all in the pursuit of where we actually will find happiness as our goal. So instead of looking at it as, just kind of a book of sadness, like a lot of people do, or a book of depression, it's actually a trip, a long and windy road towards happiness. So that's what we've been kind of doing. And particularly in the last 2 chapters or so, chapter 4 and 5, what he's done is he's started chipping away at the issue of wealth. And Wealth is typically, we would often associate wealth with happiness. And so what he wants to do over here is kind of peel back the layers and say it's not so simple. And as we actually talked about, or as he expresses in the first chapter, one of the things that he has is the qualifications. He is wealthy. He is the wealthiest man of his generation. One of the wealthiest men in human history, the wealthiest people in human history. So in that sense, he knows what wealth is, and he can talk about it and say that is not everything it's cracked up to be. The last thing he discussed in that chapter 5 is the idea of what he kind of expresses as the first issue of wealth. And his first issue of wealth is when you don't have it, when you're used to it and you don't have it, when you get used to a certain lifestyle and suddenly that disappears. So in that sense, that was the first issue that he spoke about. Again, that was in chapter 5, where you got a person who gets so used to it and it doesn't last. And for some reason or another, you're stuck with picking up the pieces and trying to live a new life that you're not used to. And what we saw over there was that he seemed to say that we have to learn a new skill. It's very important for us to learn the skill of adapting. Sorry, that's the word I was looking for. We have to learn how to adapt to new circumstances. So when a person goes through issues in their life, they have to learn how to adapt to new things going on. And in the case of wealth, that's one of the things that shows up. You have a person who has wealth, or families that have wealth, and then one of the members of the family, or the whole family as a whole, loses that wealth. It gets very difficult for the entire family. So we have to learn how to adapt. And so hidden inside the lesson about wealth itself is this sub lesson of adaptation. And he's going to do a similar thing over here with these verses over here at the beginning of chapter 6. He's going to express a new issue that we have with wealth, but inside of it, he's going to cloak another lesson. And I think that's really an interesting thing that he's going to be doing over here. Yeah, okay. So let's get started on this first verse over here. Oh, that was the last thing I wanted to mention. The last thing I wanted to mention was that in case any of these things sound cliche, they perhaps may be nowadays, but here's where it comes from. So this is the original source. All the discussion, everything you've ever heard about why wealth is, not the source of happiness. He's the one to start chipping away at that. So that's why it may seem to us at first cliche, but you have to recognize this is where it all came from, these concepts. So that was the last thing I want to mention before we get into the actual verses. So let me start here with verse number 1. Again, this is chapter 6, verse number 1. And he says like this: Yesh ra'ah, there is a wickedness, there is an evil. Asher ra'iti tachat hashamesh, that I have seen under the sun. V'ra'ba hi al ha'adam, and it is much on the person. Okay, we're going to discuss exactly what that means, but not that much here in this verse. It's a introductory verse over here. And he says once again, Yesh ra'ah, there is an evil. Asher ra'iti tachat hashamesh, that I have seen under the sun. V'ra'ba hi al ha'adam, and it is much on a person. Okay, so before we get into what is that much that he talks about, the first thing that I want to mention is he talks about tachat hashamesh, under the sun. Okay, we have expressed in the past that the phrase under the sun, what that's trying to show us is that we're talking about things in this world. That's an important point of the book of Kohelet in general, is that we're focused at this point, at least, on things in this world. We're not talking about spiritual endeavors necessarily. We're talking about physical endeavors. So he's trying to talk about how to achieve happiness from the physical. It is a spiritual journey also, but here particularly, he wants us to focus on the physical. That is an important point that he wants to keep us focused on. All right, so that's one of the first points that we want to bring out over here. Is tachat hashamesh means we're talking about specifically in this world. We're not talking about a necessarily a spiritual endeavor. It is the search for happiness, but from the physical world. And so what he says over here is that is Rabbah, this evil that we're talking about is Rabbah on people. And there are two explanations that I have seen on this. The first one is Rashi, kind of I call him the king of the commentaries. And Rashi explains that Rabbah hi al Adam means that it affects everybody, or affects lots of people. All right, so it's pretty common issue. But we haven't said what the issue is yet, but this issue that we're about to say is a common issue. The second explanation of Rabbah is from the Mitsuda, with another one of the primary commentaries. Now, what he says is Rabbah hi al Adam means that we're talking about something that is oppressive on a person. It overwhelms a person. All right, so that's two explanations of what this term Rabbah hi al Adam, right? It is much on a person, meaning either it affects lots of people. It's not just a singular occurrence. It happens very often. Or when it happens, it overwhelms, it takes a person over. It's really strong on a person, really overwhelms them. So those are our two explanations about what that phrase means. So once again, to read the verse all together, Yishra'ah, there is an evil, asheriti tachat hashamish, that I have seen under the sun, v'rabahi al ha'adam, and it is either very common by people or it is oppressive on people. It could overwhelm a person when they face it. Okay, so these are two explanations of what that verse means. But again, this is just an introductory verse. We haven't yet explained what we're talking about. We've just explained that we're going to talk about another issue that you find with wealth. Okay, and because that's what we're focused on. We're focused on wealth right here. All right, so let me move on to the next verse, because again, this is just an introduction. So let's move on to the next verse, not spend too much time on that. All right, let me just highlight it here. And this is a longer verse, so we're going to break it up, just kind of take it slow. And he says like this: what is the case? The case that I saw, he says, is Ish. We have a person, Asher Yiten Loha Elokim, that God gives that person Osher Unchasim, wealth and property, Vichavod and honor, Veinenu Chaser L'nafsho, and the person does not lack for themselves Mikol Asher Yitavet, anything that they desire. Right, so they lack nothing that they desire. All right, so that's our first case. We're just setting the cases. We have a person. The person has wealth, property, honor, and the ability to achieve whatever they want. They're not lacking for themselves whatever they desire. However, he says, "V'lo yashlitanu ha'elokim." God does not give that person control, le'echol mimenu, to consume it, to eat their wealth, to consume their wealth. Ki ish nachri yochelenu, because somebody else, some stranger, is eating it. Zeh hevel. Number one, this is what we call hevel. I'll discuss that in a second. All the old timers will know what that means. And v'chali rahu, it's also a sickness on the person. It is a bad sickness. Okay, so let me take that all from the top one more time, just so we get the flow of it once more. Ish asher yitein lo ha'elokim. You have a person who was given by God Osher, wealth, the chasim, property, the chavod, honor, veinenu chaser l'nafsho, is not lacking for themselves, mikol asher yitavet, whatever they desire. V'lo yashlitanu ha'elokim. However, God does not give that person control, le'echol mimenu, to consume from their wealth. Ki ish nachri, rather, that word ki has multiple meanings, but in this case it's ranger. Sorry, ki ish nachri yochelenu, I'm in the wrong place. Another person, a stranger, is going to consume it. Zehevel, this is number one, it's called hevel. The chalirahu, and it is a bad sickness. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack over here. So let's just take it piece by piece and kind of follow the flow of the verse. The first thing that I want to point out over here is we've got four things that are mentioned by Kohelet over here. We've got wealth, property, honor, and nothing lacking for themselves from whatever they desire. All right, those are four things that we're mentioning over here. And the way I kind of perceive this is we've got it's almost a stages. So a person has wealth. Now that itself is a wonderful thing, right? If a person has the ability, has the just simply the cash, the gold, the silver, whatever it is, they have the cash in order to do things, right? They have a storehouse of wealth. So in that case, wealth itself doesn't necessarily have any use to it by itself. Wealth is a way to achieve something else, right? I remember growing up as a kid, we had a TV show called DuckTales. The DuckTales, I think it was DuckTales. It was based on the family of Daffy Duck and his nephews, and there was a character, Scrooge McDuck, and one of the scenes was Scrooge would always dive into a swimming pool full of gold and swim through the gold. Now, obviously, you can't do that. And second of all, that's not what gold does, right? Gold you don't enjoy gold. I guess to a certain degree, you could enjoy gold by itself. But money itself is only a path towards something else. And that's our next thing, which is nechasim. That's property, okay? So wealth leads to property. It leads to something that actually has a value, not in just itself, but in how it's able to produce something else. So a person moves from wealth to nechasim, to property, okay? Property, again, that's something that actually has a purpose. It goes and it accomplishes a specific goal. That then leads a person to the next step, which is kavod, which is honor, or I'd rather say influence. Okay, the person who has wealth and uses it is able to then shift that towards influence. Okay, influence is the ability to then create that connection with other people through their, we could call it wealth, we could call it privilege, we could call it whatever we want, right? But whatever it is, you are, through the tools that you have, you're using that to influence other people, right? So we're calling that kavod, honor, but it's really more than that. It's the ability to affect change through other people, through the person's wealth. And with all those pieces together, you've got the potential for power through wealth itself. You've got the actualized power through property. You've got the actualized power influencing other people through honor. And then finally, that all leads to this main point of kind of that fourth level, is where you reach a point where a person does not lack anything that they desire. They are not lacking for themselves, whatever they desire, from anything that they desire. It'aveh, the shorish, the root there is this ta'ava, taf aleph vav hey, which means desire. Okay, so in the second round of the 10 Commandments in the book of Deuteronomy, in the book of Dvarim, it tells us lo titaveh. A person should not desire those things from other people. So that's what we're saying over here, that the person is able to use all these forces together to achieve whatever they want. And with all that, all the pieces are in place. There is still one thing that the person misses. You can have the money to buy whatever you want, but it doesn't necessarily give you control over everything under your umbrella, really. And that's this over here. Person may be able to buy everything they want, but it doesn't necessarily work for them without a permission granted from upstairs. Shalat over here, this shorish, this root word over here, shin lamed tet. We've discussed that before in previous chapters. It's the Hebrew word shalat means control. In fact, a remote control for a TV in modern Hebrew is a shalat. That's the same word. Okay, or in Arabic we have the idea of a sultan, right? The sultan is the controller, is the ruler. So it's actually the same related word in Arabic. All right, so God may not allow that person to actually appreciate, to actually consume the things that they have. So with all the pieces are in place, everything's working out, but there's still something missing, which is basically the permission from upstairs for it to actually go through. Instead, somebody else is going to enjoy it. And by the way, it's not somebody else as in their children, like we discussed in the last chapter. We discussed person works and then hands it all over to their kids. Who says the kids have the brains to keep the money? That was already discussed. Here we have an even worse problem. Somebody else is enjoying it. Somebody else, ish nachri, a stranger, somebody who's not related. This is not like well, he doesn't get to enjoy it, but he gets to watch somebody else enjoy it. No, he's not even connected to this person. It's a ish nachri, a totally strange person is going to enjoy this food, this wealth, this whatever power, this influence, whatever it is. In that case, all that together is again what we call hevel. And for the newcomers, I guess, hevel means the way we understand hevel in this class at least, is that hevel literally means steam. Like when you boil water, steam comes up, steam rises. The idea of steam in our understanding, the way we explain it here, is that steam is something that is it's there, it is technically tangible, but if you try to grab it with your hands, you're not going to get much out of it, right? You can't collect steam with your hands. If you put in work and if you have the right tools to do so, you can distill steam, you can turn it into liquid, you can get something out of it. But for your average person, for your average just trying with your bare hands to get it, there's nothing to it. So in that sense, a lot of the things that we talk about in the book of Kohelet are hevel, they're steam, meaning perhaps there is something good that you could get out of this. Perhaps there's a way you could spin this the right way, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of self work and introspection and in order to bring the good out of a difficult situation. So it's not something to give up on entirely, but it's something to focus your energy on. Really, you have to work hard to get something out of it. So that's what we're talking about over here, is perhaps there's something good about this situation. I haven't pinpointed exactly what that is yet, but perhaps there's something good that we could pull out of this, but it's not for most of us just trying to grab at it, we're just not going to come up with anything in our hands. The last thing is he adds in the second description over here. He keeps on doing this, kind of throwing different descriptions of futility at us, and that's this chali ra. It is a bad sickness, and I think it's really kind of a fitting explanation or fitting description over here, because everything's working. The person has money, they have property, they have influence, they can buy whatever they want, but they're not enjoying anything. So it's like a person who, besides for their sickness, they're perfectly healthy. That's a bad sickness, right? Probably one of humankind's greatest fears is cancer, right? I would say that's one of the biggest fears of life. That's a bad sickness. Why is it a bad sickness? Because you could do most everything you want in your life and still, unfortunately, it can still occur to a person. It can still come on to a person, even if they live a healthy lifestyle. So that's, in that case, we have the same kind of issue over here, where you've done, all the pieces are in place, but it's sick. There's a sickness here because it's not working the way it should be. And so it's just like, almost kind of, I would say, just like a case of cancer, where a person is perfectly healthy except for this terrible sickness. So in that sense, that's what this descriptor is. So again, this is our case. He's setting up the case over here. He already called it bad. He said it's very common, or when it happens to a person, it's very, very oppressive to the person. And he says, what's the case? You have a guy, you have a person, you have whatever it is, and the person has everything is, all the stars are lining up, except they're just not. They're not enjoying, they're not able to appreciate everything that they have, even though they could buy whatever they want and they have the influence to get whatever they want. They're not enjoying. And that's our case. And so he's going to discuss that. And I think that's actually what we're going to get into a little bit over here, is this issue of not being able to enjoy the things that you actually have. And so with that, we move on to the third verse over here. Again, this is chapter 6, verse number 3. Okay. And he says like this. So you have this person. He says, Im yolid ish, if the person were to give birth, me'ah, to 100 children, right? The person's got a humongous family. Vishanim rabot yichyah, and lives for many years. V'rav sheyihyu yemei shanav, and there's just this abundance to the years of their life. V'nafsho lo tisba min hatova, but they are not in their lifetime, in their living, they do not have satisfaction from the good. V'gam kivura lo hayetalo, and they do not even have a proper burial. Interesting kind of allegory over there. Amarti, I say, tov mimenu hanafal, better than that person is the stillborn. Okay, nafal is a child who was never born. Okay, so again, another kind of long verse, so we'll read through it again. It says, "Em yolid ish me'ah." If this person gives birth to 100 children, v'shanim rabot yichyeh, and lives for many years, v'rav sheihyu yemei shanav, and there's just an abundance to the days of their years. I mean, they're living what appears on the outside to be a very full life. But they're in their life, they're not enjoying any of the goodness. And they do not even get proper burial. Amarti, I say on that person, tov mimenu hanafel, better than that person is the stillborn. Okay, and so again, this is kind of continuing with this theme of everything is working out for this person, everything is going great, and nevertheless, nothing. They're not achieving enjoyment, and that's a major key, a key point over here. Is this enjoyment, is satisfaction? Lo tispa min hatova, they're not enjoying the good that they have. In that case, even if you have everything in the world and you get nothing is withheld from you, but if you can't achieve satisfaction, then better than that person is the nafel, is the stillborn. Now that's a pretty depressing statement, obviously, and we don't like depressing statements. So we're going to have to kind of go through this piece by piece in the coming verses, because it sounds pretty bleak at this point. But what he is saying over here is that with everything that the person's going through, without that key, that major pivot point of satisfaction, then better than that person is a stillborn. Okay, that is again, that's a heavy statement, a very heavy statement. But what we're going to find is that he's going to kind of bring that to life in the coming verses. I have to, unfortunately, cut it a little short tonight. We've got some scheduling issues, but I appreciate you all coming. We will go, we'll come back to verse number 3 next week, and then continue from there to 4, 5, and 6, where he fleshes out this idea and shows us, again, for those of you who haven't seen this yet, he's going to show us something that looks very bleak, and we're actually going to learn a very important lesson from it that empowers, that empowers us and doesn't necessarily tear us down. But we will see that in the coming weeks and in next week, God willing. So that again is, let me just look at my calendar over here. That's not my calendar. There's my calendar. That is going to be the 25th. Okay, so God willing, I'll see you all back here on the 25th next week at 8 p.m. And until then, let me go into the main room. There we go. Thank you all for joining us.